Welcome to the Educational Leadership Podcast with Principal JL, the place where school leaders recharge, rethink, and remember their purpose. If you're a superintendent, assistant superintendent, a principal, assistant principal, dean of students, teacher leader, or a future administrator, you're in the right place. Here we mix practical strategies with real conversations, a little wit, and a whole lot of purpose. Because leadership isn't about the title on your badge, it's the influence you carry every single day with your teachers, staff, students, and families. Our mission is simple: to inform, inspire, and to help you lead with purpose. To give you tools that actually work, stories that spark reflection, and ideas you can use the minute an episode ends. So grab that caffeinated drink, a notebook, and your growth mindset, and get ready to level up your leadership one episode at a time. Because around here, we don't aim for perfect. We aim to be 1% better every single day. Now let's get to the episode. Have you ever struggled with being an instructional leader? Have you sometimes wondered where the joy in the work is? You're not alone. In this episode, we learn from Dr. Danny Steele's educational journey that will provide insights to these questions we may have. For 31 years, Dr. Steele served as a teacher, coach, assistant principal, and assistant professor of educational leadership. His work has earned statewide recognition. He was formerly the Alabama Assistant Principal of the Year in 2005 and Alabama Secondary Principal of the Year in 2016. He has authored 6 books, including 2 with Todd Whitaker, and he's become one of the most sought-after voices on school leadership, culture, and the human side of our work. Today, we're diving into his leadership journey, the lessons he's learned across decades of service, and his newest book, The Educational Leader in You, 10 Strategies for School Leaders. Now, let's get to the conversation with Dr. Danny Steele. Welcome back for another exciting episode of the Educational Leadership Podcast. Today, I am so excited to bring in Dr. Danny Steele. Danny, welcome to the show.
Jeff, I appreciate you having me. It's an honor to be with you guys.
All right, Danny, I'm going to ask you the same question I ask every guest on this show. What inspired you to become an educator?
When I first went to college in the fall of 1988, my major was sociology, and I was set on being a social worker of some sort. But fall of my sophomore year, I listened to a tape recording that my brother gave me. It was a tape recording of a guy giving a talk at a conference, and his name was Guy Dowd, and he was the 1986 National Teacher of the Year. He spoke about his experiences as a kid himself in school and teachers that really had a transformative impact on his own life. And then as a teacher, he talked about ways that he's built relationships with his own students and the difference he feels like that has made. And just listening to the power of his experiences inspired me to want to be a teacher. And so I changed that semester. I changed my major to history and education so I could be a history teacher. And yeah, it was all about the potential to make a difference for kids.
Awesome. I mean, always we get inspired by somebody. There's always interesting ways we all get into this profession. I know for me, it was coaching. So that's what got me going to really start thinking about becoming an educator. So you're a history teacher, you're doing the work. What experiences do you have from being a teacher that informs your leadership today?
I think, I began my career in an urban high school in Birmingham, and there were a lot of challenges there. The students didn't have many opportunities. And after 4 years there, I went to teach at a very, very affluent suburban school where the kids had every advantage in the world. And I loved both experiences. One of the things that I learned in those 8 years in the classroom is that kids have a lot more in common than they have different. They all want to feel respected. They all want to feel connected. They want to feel valued. They want to feel normal, in a certain way. And they all appreciate their teachers that take a genuine interest in them. And I think all of those realities transfer to when you're working with adults. Like, every teacher wants to feel like the work they're doing matters. They want their professional judgment to be valued and respected. They want to feel like they have a voice in the school, and they want their administration to be genuine, to be authentic about caring about the students and about supporting the staff.
You really kind of touch things on there is no matter where you're at, kids are kids, right? They all want the same thing. They all want to build a relationship with them. They want that, connection with their people so they can, have a great experience in their school. So I really appreciate you bringing that out. So kind of been teaching for a while, have these great experiences. What inspires you to go from the classroom into administration? What was it, a push, a nudge, like, it was time, or was you inspired by somebody?
I had the University of Alabama, Birmingham had a program where if you already had a master's, and at the time I had a master's in history, you could do a year of classes and some 300 hours of internship and get your administrative add-on certificate. And I had a couple colleagues at this school that had done that. And so they sort of planted that seed with me. At the same time, I was realizing that I just didn't like being confined to my classroom. Oftentimes on my planning period, like, what I needed to do was just sit at my desk and grade papers or plan lessons. But I found myself getting up and walking the halls and poking my head in other doors. I checked my mailbox like 5 times in the teacher's lounge just because I liked being out and about. And so I decided to do this program. The very first course was on leadership and management. And it was a really good professor. And I was so intrigued at the idea of the difference between leadership and management and seeing a bigger picture and thinking about the way I could potentially impact, an entire school. And that I just kind of, during the course of that year and taking those classes, I got the itch. And so after that, as soon as I got my certificate, I applied to like 50 different schools to be an assistant principal.
Awesome. So you moved into assistant principal role, which is not easy, right? Because you deal with a lot of student discipline most of the time. And you may have some other things, but that's what people think of as assistant principal, what they work through. So what are some lessons that you have learned as an assistant principal that when it was time for you to become a principal, you were able to take away and utilize in that position?
Well, in a lot of ways, that's the $1 million question for me. Certainly I was an assistant principal for 10 years in 4 different high schools. And most of that time I did discipline, and it's hard to stress just how intense that discipline was. And so I saw a lot of kids that were misbehaving and disrespectful and defiant and giving their teacher fits. And I also saw teachers that would never send anybody to the office. And so I learned to sort of pay attention to what are the dynamics in classrooms that impact the extent to which students are more likely to get off task or more likely to be disrespectful. I experienced a lot of the drama that students are dealing with. It's been said that when a student acts out, it's often because of an unmet need. And so I saw a lot of students in my office that were dealing with a lot of hard stuff, and it makes your heart break. But it's important to be aware that the kids walking our halls, the kids sitting in the lunchroom, the kids in the classrooms, they've got a home life sometimes that is a significant obstacle to them being successful in the school. So that really hit home for me. And that's something that I always carried with me as a principal. But the other piece is I really wanted to be a principal. And I had been an assistant principal for 3 years at this point when my principal was retiring. And so I thought, all right, I'm going to get my shot. He's retiring. I've been an AP here for 2 years at this school. So I'm next up, right? I got dibs on the spot. So I was very confident about my chances. And at one point in the application process in the spring, I was riding with my principal. We were in the car, and he said, Danny, I think some of the teachers at the school see you more as an advocate for students than for teachers. It immediately, like, I whipped my head around. I'm like, yeah, the kids need me. Like, the adults can take care of themselves. I'm here for the kids. I couldn't even believe that would be held against me. I thought it would be a badge of honor that I was still here for kids. Well, I didn't get the job, as you can imagine. And so that summer, I think it was the summer of 2004, I had this administrative paradigm shift. What I realized, this was a tough lesson for me to learn. I say it was a tough lesson because I think it cost me that first principalship, is, when we become an educator, we become teachers for kids because we love kids. We want to create a brighter future for them, make a difference for them. Well, what I learned the hard way, and what I tell any young administrator, is that the moment you become an administrator, your focus has to change. Your new mission is to win over all of the adults, to make a difference for your teachers. Now, we still love the kids. We never stop loving on the students. We never stop doing what's right for them. But when you're an administrator, your job is to support your staff. And I actually tell young administrators this, that you will be defined by your ability to support your staff. So that is without a doubt the biggest lesson I learned as a young AP that has been stuck with me now for over 20 years.
Awesome. I love that story because, you don't really think about the different paradigm shifts you have to make from when you go from the classroom into the assistant principal, then the principal, then maybe district or cabinet, or maybe superintendent. There's always a shift because your view becomes bigger and wider than it does when you're in the classroom. So now you're thinking, oh, I have this, and then all these things work together. And so when you talk about taking care of your adults, I agree with that 100%, because if you take care of the adults, they take care of the kids, and then everybody wins, right?
Yeah.
And that's how you as a principal take care of the students, is by making sure this staff is being taken care of, because if they're taken care of, they'll take care of the kids, and then everybody wins in that situation. So I love that, just that story in general. And it's very powerful, big takeaway for people on this show. So walk us through some different administrative roles. It seems like you've got quite a few. Kind of, talk about each one. Do you have any stories or things that you've learned from each role? We just talked about the AP, you have your principal. Just take us through what your administrative career looks like and what did you learn through that time?
Well, the first 6 years as an AP, I did almost exclusively discipline. So I learned a lot about kind of handling kids and handling the tough ones, and then what it means to support staff through the disciplinary process. Then my last 4 years as an assistant principal, I was in an academic and instructional role. So I was the coordinator of the AP program. I planned the master schedule and PD for the staff. I worked closely with our counselors. So if a parent was going to complain about a teacher, I was the administrator that it got routed to. So that was a process of me really learning what it meant to build good working relationships with my teachers, specifically the department heads. It was very significant to learn how to build the master schedule and what's involved in that. And so by the time I became principal in 2011, I'd done everything I could do as an AP, I felt like. So I felt pretty prepared. Then as a principal, it is, it's about trying to build the best possible school culture where kids thrive, where they want to come to school, where the adults like coming to work. It's about building relationships with kids, building relationships with staff, and doing everything you can to ensure your teachers have the resources they need to get the job done and kind of get out of their way at that point. Trying to foster collaboration to where the adults are working together, not because they just have to be best friends, but because when the adults are collaborating, when everyone's pulling the wagon in the same direction, it's best for kids. It's best for their learning. So, I never worked in central office, so I can't really speak from the district level. I've worked with a lot of folks at the district level, and so I know that the ones that I felt like are the most effective, the ones that principals really like working with, are the ones that view their role as a support to support the work that's going on in the school. So, yeah, it's the best administrative teams just view themselves as a supportive role. I mean, I've said at countless faculty meetings, there are two groups of people in a school building. I would even say there's two groups of people in an entire district whose job has inherent value, and that is the teachers and the CNP staff. Everyone else is really in a supportive role to help the teachers do their job more effectively. So certainly the best administrators, the best principals, they view themselves in a supportive role for the staff.
Awesome. I love it. Danny, we have a lot of, people that are thinking about making the jump into administration. What advice, I think you kind of touched on it a little bit, but what advice would you give someone that's, aspiring to be an administrator someday?
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
This podcast is a proud member of the Teach Better Podcast Network. Better today, better tomorrow, and the podcast to get you there. Explore more podcasts at www.teachbetterpodcastnetwork.com. Now let's get back to the episode.
Like you have to have the joy. You have to have joy in the job. And so it has to be your passion. I mean, it's a stressful job, just like teaching is a stressful job. And if you're not passionate about teaching, then it will wear on your last nerve and you're going to want to switch careers. If you're passionate about leading a school, about being an administrator, you're going to love it. It's an amazing career. I was a school building administrator for 22 years and I loved it. And so, the term light bulb moment, right? For teachers, like the light bulb moment is this gratifying moment for a teacher when they're teaching a lesson and the kids' eyes light up like a light bulb because they're getting the lesson. They're having this insight. And it's such a rewarding moment for educators. Well, I had some stress early on as an administrator because, I don't have those light bulb moments as an administrator because we're not teaching the kids, right? So what was important for me, an important kind of aha moment, is when I learned to redefine my light bulb moments. And so for me, a light bulb moment now is anytime I can make a teacher's job a little bit easier. If I can help a teacher with a challenging kid, if I can help a teacher with a high maintenance parent, if I can help them write an email, if I have their back in a tough parent conference, if I can help them move their filing cabinet across their room on their planning period. If you know this, when you walk the halls, if you have your head on a swivel, light bulb moments are all around you. And so it is a great, great career and just unbelievably rewarding if you're always looking out for ways to make a difference for the adults in the building. We still love on the kids. You never stop loving on the kids. Eat with them at lunch. Talk to them at carpool. When you're making a difference for the teachers, for the staff, and having fun doing it, goofing off with your secretaries, playing practical jokes on custodians, whatever it is, have fun. Have fun. And it's a great career.
Yeah, I love it. I love that you talked about finding the joy. Yes, you have to be passionate about it. I'll be honest. I was a math teacher for 11 years before becoming a principal. And I was a small rules principal at first. So I was doing the discipline and the building level stuff kind of all at the same time. But now I'm a building principal at a larger district where I can really focus on the adults and the vision of the building, where I have assistant principal that help me out. We just make sure we're consistent on everything. And there's got to be a pretty big issue if I'm involved with some of that because my assistant principals are amazing, do a great job with that. But I love finding the joy. And then you're right. Those light bulb moments are when you're helping those adults and things are clicking, things are moving in the right direction. And like you said, if you take the time to see it, it's there. And you just sometimes when you're down and out in this job and you feel like, oh man, I'm just getting beat up today, stop, look for the joy, because it's there. You just got to find it and be intentional about it. And that gives you that motivation to continue on. And so that's kind of my experience, but I really appreciate you kind of pointing that out. You hear a lot about negative things in the media about education, but I want to kind of talk about something a little bit different. What gets you excited about the future of education? Because there are a lot of exciting things that are going to get ready to happen for education. What's something that excites you about it?
Well, I think what's exciting, it's the same thing that makes a lot of people uneasy right now. It's that, technology, AI, it's causing us to really reevaluate what we're doing and why we're doing it. I think it could change the landscape. We don't know. There's nobody knows exactly what the future is going to be like. And so we're preparing kids for an uncertain time. I think that's exciting. I mean, it's stressful in a lot of ways, but it's important that educators have the courage to just jump in and say, okay, we're going to figure this out. We're going to figure out how to work with our kids. We're going to look to see how we can use AI to be more effective as educators, as leaders. And we're going to look to see how to teach our kids to thrive in a world that's in so many ways now going to be dominated by AI. But one thing that's never going to change is the personal relationships, those personal connections. I know that there's ChatGPT can simulate in so many ways a relationship, but it's scary what it can do. But I still think nothing is going to replace, people having personal connections. And so, educators with their heart in the game, they're going to continue to make a difference for kids.
And I really appreciate that point, because AI is not here to replace teachers, right? If you utilize it as a tool, like the calculator or like any other technology, like the internet, right? When it first came out, people were having the same issues with those technologies as AI today. But if we learn how to use it appropriately and we utilize it as a tool, and as a teacher, it could actually help you become a better teacher, because it's going to be able to differentiate the information you already have and you already know in ways that's going to be much quicker than you can personally do it. You're the one guiding it. You're the one prompting it. AI can't do it without you. So that's what people got to realize. AI can't work itself. It has to be prompted. We have to utilize it in a way that, in my way of using it at our building, is we use it through Magic School AI, which is an educational platform, to where teachers can use it to help them differentiate instruction, but also come up with fresh ideas that they would spend lots of time doing on their own. I had a teacher that's an English teacher able to differentiate instruction, and they said, man, this saves me hours of time, and now I have more time to do these other things, and I'm becoming a better teacher because of it. And I think that's what other people need to realize. If you learn how to utilize it right, it can be a big help. I use it, and I know there's a lot of things with the environment. I won't get into that. I use it to help streamline some of the things I do, so I can spend more time on the things that matter most, and I'm not stuck in all these mundane stuff. And so that's kind of how I look at it or view it. And some people may agree or disagree. If you disagree with me or agree with me, I'd like to hear from you. Hit in the comments. Love to hear those things. But coming down to it, I had a guest on the show that said he heard someone say, AI is not going to take your job. The people that know how to use AI is going to take your job. So I think that's something to kind of remember as well. And then I saw an article where it talks about like AI is going to replace all the teachers by 2036. And I like, you're an idiot. It's like, no, it won't. It won't replace the human connection people got to have to learn. That is why in-person learning is so much better than virtual. Remember COVID when we were doing virtual? It wasn't the same. You got to have those human connection. Learning is better because you had a lot of learning loss during that COVID time with the virtual learning. But human connection is so key when it comes down to just learning and having those experiences that you just can't get sitting at a computer screen. So there, I'm off my tirade. Sorry, Danny, took over a little bit there. Let's get into your book, right? You have a new book titled The Instructional Leader in You, 10 Strategies for School Leaders. So what inspired you to write the book?
So I was working a year and a half ago, I was doing some coaching with a couple young principals, and the superintendent said, these guys are young. They were coaches. One of them was a PE teacher. They don't really have any instructional leadership capacity. So that's what I really want you to work with them on. And after I spent the first day with them, what I realized is that while they did not view themselves, nor did their teachers view them as instructional leaders, they had great relationships with their teachers. And the school culture was good. The teachers trusted them. And so, I said, guys, y'all have done the heavy lifting. You've won over the teachers, and that's 95% of the job. If you can just learn to leverage certain strategies or mindsets, shift your thinking slightly, you really can move the needle with teaching and learning and student achievement. And so I wrote a blog post about kind of 10 strategies that school leaders can use. My editor liked it, said, that can be a book. So wrote the book, each chapter a different strategy. So I'm excited because I, as a school leader, every principal knows they're supposed to be the instructional leader. And certainly every superintendent wants their principals to be their instructional leader. But as a principal, you're oftentimes just trying to keep your head above water, right? You're just sometimes you feel like you're drowning. You're going from one fire to the next. And the management piece of leading a school just is you pull you in a million directions. And so oftentimes instructional leadership sort of takes a back seat. And so this was a book that was designed, I wanted to empower teachers that, you can make a difference. Even if you don't have a PhD in curriculum and instruction, even if you don't know all of the research from John Hattie, you can make an impact. For me, I think instructional leadership is about adding value to the instructional program. It's not about having all the answers. It's certainly not about having all the expertise. That's part of what's so intimidating about it, is so many principals put this idea of instructional leader up on a pedestal, and they feel like they have to be all and do all, and that's just not the case. That's where these strategies come in.
So I have a question for you because you got me thinking, right? I try really, really hard to be good at being an instructional leader. I've tried different strategies. For me, it's kind of like, okay, I'm going to try these things. I mean, I block out time in my calendar. I go around, I do my walkthroughs, I do all the things, and I use my little cards and all that stuff. There's times where there's things I got to do, and I feel bad because I can't be the instructional leader like I'd want to be all the time, but I'm always trying to find one little thing to do a little bit differently so I can make that progress towards that. And I think you talked about putting this instructional leadership on a pedestal, but I think what you're saying is, and maybe tell me if I'm wrong, you want to strive to be the best instructional leader you can. We all know that we can't do it the way we think we should do it. So maybe if you just learn to infuse these strategies a little bit at a time, that you'll eventually get to where you want to be. Is that kind of where I'm picking up?
Because
I feel bad when I don't do it
the
way I envision myself doing it. Because I'll come in like, I'm going to do it this way and it's going to be great. And then it's like, oh no, the low of the year goes and I don't do what I set out to do as best as I thought I would.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is just, it's so easy for administrators to feel inadequate in that capacity.
Yeah.
Because they are pulled in so many directions, or because maybe they don't feel that they have the skill or the expertise. And my strategies that I've identified in this book don't require expertise. They require commitment. Things like being curious, things like being intentional, being focused more on student learning than on teaching. That doesn't take a PhD. That doesn't take expertise, but it does take a shift in your thinking.
So if someone's reading your book, I mean, there's 10 strategies and you probably can sit here for hours talking about all of them. What are some of the big takeaways that you would say you would hope leaders would take away from the book after they read it?
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Hey there, amazing educational leaders. If you're finding value in this podcast, learning new insights, getting inspired, or just nodding along thinking, yep, I needed that, then why keep it to yourself? Share this podcast with a colleague, a fellow school leader, or a teacher that is inspiring into leadership. Send them a link, post about it, or just casually drop, hey, you need this in your life the next time you see them. Let's grow this community of game-changing educators together, because great leadership isn't a solo act, it's a movement. Now, back to the show.
Well, the one big takeaway is I want principals to read this book and think, all right, I've got this. Yes, I can do it. I can be the instructional leader in my building. So I want teachers or principals rather, to come away feeling inspired and empowered. The foundation, the very first chapter, is curiosity. Again, that doesn't take expertise, but it does take a commitment to asking questions, asking good questions. And you don't have to have all the answers, but you commit yourself, and hopefully you foster a collective commitment with your team that we're going to figure out these answers. And it can be questions about what's the right curriculum for us? What are the best strategies? What's the best bell schedule for our students? How is AI going to be changing the way we teach? What's the best way to assess our students? You can sit here and you could come up with 1,000 questions, and asking questions of yourself, asking questions of your staff, that jumpstarts this process of moving forward in the right direction. It all starts with curiosity. And I would say the other thing is, another foundational strategy is being intentional. Like, instructional leadership typically doesn't happen by accident, but it's about being mindful. I mean, you made reference to the fact that you've got things blocked off in your calendar. If you don't block off time in your calendar, it ain't happening. Because of all the stuff, you have to be very deliberate about, okay, I'm going to be in the classrooms this time. I'm going to leave my phone in my office, so I'm not pulled by my phone. The announcements that you make over the intercom, what you choose to talk about, the emails that you send out, what messages are in your emails to staff? Does it reflect your commitment and your priority for teaching and learning? The agendas of the faculty meeting, is it just a bunch of housekeeping stuff, or are you focused on building capacity with your staff? Is it focused on things that matter for student learning? So that being intentional is just being mindful of the fact that teaching and learning is the core business of our school. And I don't want there ever to be any ambiguity about what our priorities are. And it's not going to happen by accident, but it's going to be a focus. We're going to be intentional.
I love it. Curiosity and being intentional are two things that are pretty simple to do, and you can implement those things right away. I know for this school year, I always try to have some sort of theme or something that we're trying to do. And this year, we have a brand new superintendent, a brand new curriculum director, a brand new operations manager, a brand new SPED director. So we have four different people in 4 different cabinet positions this year. So I came with the whole be curious mindset for this year, because guys, this is going to be a different year. We have new leadership. And so we're not sure how everything's going to go, but we need to be curious when we're, hey, let's ask questions. Let's be curious about the whys and the things like that. And also, how can you be curious about the things you do every day? And then the intentionality, like you said, being intentional with what you do and how you do that is really important. So I really appreciate you bringing that out there. Is there a third strategy you might want to talk about that? Those are 2 really good ones. Let's go one more.
I would say being strategic with delegation. And I would take 2 angles there. One is, there are some things that you're doing management-wise as a principal that probably someone else on your team can do. Whether it's an assistant principal or a secretary or someone else. Sometimes it's a lead teacher. There's things that there are staff members that would like to step up actually and handle some of that stuff. And when you delegate some of those tasks, that frees you up to get into classrooms and to have conversations with teachers about student learning. The other part of being strategic with delegation is recognizing that there is expertise on your staff and there is passion on your staff. There are teachers, teacher leaders who would love to play a leadership role on your staff. Maybe it's a certain initiative. Maybe it's helping to, maybe you've got someone, maybe there's a teacher on your staff that just knows a whole lot about AI and about ways to use it in the classroom. Well, they need to be kind of having a leadership role in some of your staff meetings. In my last school, we went through a year-long process of changing the bell schedule, which after 20 years, this was a big, big undertaking because it was like the schedule was like an institution that no one touched. Well, I had an assistant principal who was a wizard with bell schedules. And in a lot of ways, she led that effort in designing all different iterations and leading staff through thinking through strengths and weaknesses, because that was her passion and she was good at it. So identifying people on your staff that can step up and add value to the instructional program in maybe a way that you can't as the principal.
Awesome. So what bell schedule did you guys pick? Sorry, I had to throw that out there.
It was a combination. The biggest, our 6th and 7th grade had kind of a block schedule. 8th grade was not quite as much because we were trying to get them more transition to high school. But the big challenge we were trying to go through is we were trying to build in some time, like a 35-minute period for intervention. And a lot of schools are doing that sort of thing, trying to build in intervention time for students who need specifically tier 3 intervention, or it can be an enrichment time for kids who, are already thriving. So that was really what was the impetus for the change.
I know in my first principalship, we actually changed up the bell schedule to put in what we call win time, what I need for interventions, but also for enrichment. It wasn't just because the kid was struggling. We're also finding ways to challenge kids above what they were already doing. And then I'm at the high school I'm at now, we do an AB block schedule, but we also do interventions. We have a 40-minute time frame where we go Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday for interventions. We don't do it on Wednesday because kids get out early, and we do PLC work on Wednesday every week. So that's kind of the schedule we have. So I always like to hear how other people like to set their schedules and things like that. So it's always interesting to hear those conversations. So, man, this conversation has really kind of just flown by, and we've talked a lot. So what I want to do is kind of look ahead for you. What's next for you? What's, personally, professionally, what do you got going? Because I know you kind of been on and off some podcasts. I've seen you out there a lot talking to people about all the awesome things you're doing. So what's going on? What's up with you coming up?
Yeah, well, the biggest thing is I'm growing a business, speaking and leadership coaching. My favorite thing is to help educators overcome passion drift, whether it's teachers or school leaders. The job is stressful, and everyone gets into education very idealistic. They're going to change the world. But then the weight of the job, the physical demands and the emotional labor, sometimes we can lose some of our joy. We can lose some of our edge, and our passion drifts a little bit. But what I love to do when I come in and do, kickoffs at the beginning of the school year, or coming in the summer to do a leadership retreat, I like to bring in that spark and rejuvenate folks, bring in the positive energy, and help people reconnect with their passion and their ultimate purpose. So, yeah, I'm trying to speak at some conferences. I've been accepted to speak at ASCD in Orlando this summer, and working with some other districts. I'm going to be on the closing keynote on Saturday for the Thriving Educators Virtual Summit. So I know you could get access. I don't have that information off the top of my head, but it's through the organized binder. So if anybody that's interested, there's a great lineup of speakers. So yeah, growing that business and just looking for ways to connect and make an impact with school leaders and educators around the country. That's my new light bulb moment. That's what keeps me going.
You bet. And I appreciate the work you are doing, because we need people like you out there to help us with that passion drift and make sure that we kind of just stay, where to find the joy and stay rejuvenated and motivated to do the job, because this is tough work. It's not easy, and the day-to-day grind can get to you, but having people like you out there, makes everything, better and possible. And I really appreciate that. There's people out there that may want to connect with you. How can they do that?
Yeah, well, my email is danny@steelethoughts.com. Steele is spelled with an E. My website is steelethoughts.com, and my social media is at Steele Thoughts. So, yeah, I'd love to connect with any of your listeners. I appreciate everyone out there who's in the game and in the arena, working hard to make a difference for the students and staff of their schools. And I appreciate you having me on and giving me a voice, and appreciate the way you amplify school leaders.
You bet. Well, I appreciate you being on, and we're going to get all that information down in the show notes so they can make it easy to find you. For social media, email, websites, all that stuff will be down in the show notes for you. So, Danny, before we go, is there any last thing you would like to say to educational leaders out there that are listening to the show?
Well, I just want to say thank you. How stressful the job is, but we need school leaders who are passionate about the work that they're doing, that are passionate about building strong, positive school cultures, that are passionate about supporting their staff, and they're still committed to loving the kids in the building. So I appreciate everyone that's out there, and just encourage them to keep plugging away, because they make a difference.
All right. Appreciate, everything you're doing, and I appreciate everything that everybody else is doing out there. So, Danny, I'm going to go ahead and let you go for the day. I'll talk to you later.
Thanks, Jeff. I appreciate it.
I hope you enjoyed this episode with Dr. Danny Steele. If you found this episode impactful, please share it with other educational leaders like you. Please don't forget to subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss another impactful episode like this one. Until next time, be curious and 1% better. Thank you for sticking around to the very end of this episode. I hope this podcast brings value to you as an educational leader. I would invite you to share this podcast with other educational leaders, or maybe that inspiring teacher who would like to be an educational leader someday. I would also invite you to subscribe and to follow this podcast so you can get the most recent updated episodes when they drop. I would also love it if you leave a review and rate this podcast 5 stars, because that would make this podcast more discoverable to other educators like yourself. You can also follow me on TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, X, Threads, and Substack. All you need to do is look for Principal JO, and boom, there I am. This is where we can continue the conversations from the episodes that you have enjoyed. I am so thankful for you guys for listening. Until next time, always be 1% better.